Thank you for listening to the Unscripted Dreams Podcast with Joe and Marcus. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at unscripteddreams@gmail.com. Please support us on Patreon at the Unscripted Dreams Podcast, where we have exclusive content. If you're listening on YouTube, you can find our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or iHeartRadio. Thank you.
Yo, this is Joe.
It's Marcus, what's going on?
All right. As we know, life is full of surprises, both good and bad. The day-to-day journey is full of unforeseen obstacles, and sometimes it's hard to see our way through. Beyond the norm and mundane are where unscripted dreams live. Join us for thought-provoking discussions and interviews to help us navigate through the fog and create our own path. We are the Unscripted Dream Podcast, operating outside the margins to motivate and inspire our audience. So today's episode 7, is called Influence. And pretty much, with influence, everything you've gained from life has been learned from someone or something. So what's your take on that, Marcus? I'll let you open it up.
All right. As far as influence, I feel like, it's just, having, influence is huge as far as its ability to have the, impact on your character and your behavior and, your overall development. I think that I can confidently say, I think we take influence for granted. I don't think it's something that we really assess often, is really looking at an individual that we interact with and really taking the time to think about how much a person can influence you both positively and negatively.
I mean, I agree 100%, man. We live such a fast-paced lifestyle compared to previous generations, which makes it kind of dangerous. We are easier or more likely to be influenced by stuff now more than ever, just because everything is right in front of our face versus, technology has enhanced or increased that tenfold.
Yeah. And we have things now that influence us and we don't even know that it's actually doing it. Like the subliminal stuff that you're not even really paying attention to.
Like perfect example. What's a big movie? The Avengers.
Yeah.
I could have sworn the Avengers had or was that Transformers? It was one of the two where there was huge Pepsi ads in there and stuff like that.
Right, Transformers.
Yeah.
Transformers.
So, all through movies, you see all type of ridiculous advertisements and you don't even think about it because, you see it, it's casual, it's normal for you to see, but indirectly, when you go to Qdoba or you're going to whatever drive-through or something, you're going to be like, oh, well, let me get that Pepsi, so,
Yeah.
And you do it without even thinking.
And that's the goal. The goal is for it to be, buried in you on a, subconscious level. It's like, for example, and now also some movies aren't good at being discreet about it. Like it's obvious. I think John Wick was pretty, the last one was pretty bad with him drinking the Fanta. So I was like, come on now, you didn't even you just putting it out there. But there's actually companies ad companies that it's their that's their goal is to negotiate and get their products in the movies and TV. So that's actual. If you're into marketing, that's an actual line of business. But one thing, just as far as you're saying, Joe, things that you see on TV and things that are everywhere is that you don't understand the world around you. It's trying to influence you to do something, and it might not always be clear as to if it's a negative or a positive.
Right. And I feel like this concept, there's a term for it. It's called being a product of your environment. So, there's a lot of situations where people don't understand the reason why they may be blackballed, so to speak, or shunned, or maybe even looked at as in a good light too. just the fact of being a product of their environment. They've lived their lifestyle a certain way. They were brought up a certain way, and all of a sudden, some years have happened to a point where they're on a status that everybody can see, where everybody's kind of viewing them, and they represent a certain population of people, and they may not even realize how much or how meaningful they are to those people until probably way after the fact. But while they're in the moment, they don't realize it's all due to them being a product of their environment. So if I came from, say I came from the slums and I worked my way all the way up into stardom, whether that's being an athlete or being a rapper or whatever, a lot of people tend to look at where you came from as a compelling story. That's one. But two, most importantly, a lot of people make that comparison to say, like, hey, if that person did it, I can do it too. And I don't think people understand that that's a whole different type of level of influence that makes a huge impact. Like, I don't think people understand the power you possess as a parent, sibling, lover, and friend. Like, your attitude and demeanor may not impact people on a grand scales, but somebody is listening. Somebody's always listening. So you got little Tyrone is listening to every word that comes out of your mouth. You got baby Cindy is watching your every move. Uncle Junebug may not say much, but he taking notes on how you move in the world. So you have more influence on life than you ever know. And I'm using this platform to tell you that you are important. You make a difference. And don't let anyone per se tell you different. This is how you spread love, but you also need to acknowledge your place in the world so you can make the necessary contributions to the bigger picture. Because a lot of people don't realize that they have this platform or spotlight on them and they use it for the wrong reasons, or they make unfavorable decisions that kind of like move the agenda of everyone else. Like, other people kind of move in their way and kind of do the same thing. And it kind of just, it's like a repeating circle at that point. And I don't think people understand the power they have until it's gone, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, Jay, you touched on a couple things there, and you really what you mentioned about how your environment affects you, like being a product of your environment, and how that has an influence on you. How would you say, or how do you think someone who is from a background where things aren't as, where they aren't as privileged, how do you feel they can like identify the benefits that come with being from like an adverse environment versus from feeling like they're a victim?
I think the benefit is in the whole idea of the satisfaction of beating the odds. I think that that's the key contributor to that. Hey, I beat the odds. You can do it too. Even though that's not necessarily the case in most cases, but the idea that you've happened to be one of those people out of few thousand or several thousands or whatever to make it, you know what I'm saying? It's your job to uphold or sustain a community at that point. They may not tell you that, but you represent them. That's why you always hear about famous people coming from Detroit, Chicago, uh, LA, um, somewhere down south like Houston or somewhere, Florida. You know what I'm saying? Those people hold you to a higher pedestal, and how you did things is exactly how they're going to try to imitate, because they see somebody that came directly from where they're from move up the ladder. So if he can do it, I could do it too. And realistically, what people don't realize sometimes is that person might have made it because the timing was right, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people think that they could do the same thing, but they don't realize that it's twice as hard, maybe even more, to get to that status because we've already seen it or it's already been done before, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like as humans, we always love seeing things that haven't been done before. So say somebody already done something that was unheard of and they've gotten to that status. What does that mean for the next person that's coming up in the ranks? You're going to have to outclass them. I don't know how you're going to do it or what you're going to do, but that's how we work as humans. Like you have to outclass the other person somehow, some way.
With their response to that, you're explaining that someone who comes from an adverse background and they've overcome some hardships and they've made it by society standards of making it.
Right.
Uh, how I don't think that when someone makes it, they don't understand. Sometimes people don't understand the amount of influence that they have, and that at times can create a problem because I think that sometimes we'll put stock in a person because we see that they made it and they've overcome obstacles, and we'll put people will put faith in these people and stock in them because they're from where you're from and you can relate to them. However, you might not understand behind the scenes everything that went into that person's success, everything that went into them making it. And they also might not understand that, like you were saying, Joe, these individuals have reached this level of success and now they kind of have a responsibility because they have this level of influence that they didn't have before. And with having that influence, they have a sort of power that can be like, it's kind of like having powers that you can use for good or bad.
Yep.
And
And it's your job to figure that out quickly.
yep. But then what if they don't want to be a positive influence? They just want to, like sometimes I just want to do me.
Well, we've seen that. I could name off a bunch of famous people that didn't drop the ball and still going strong.
So, I mean, I think that plays into, like, one of the questions I had is for you is really how do you pick and choose who has an influence on you?
Like in my life, how do I pick that?
Yeah, like, or how do you, not more so how you pick, but how do you know who's a positive influence or not? Like, how do you perceive it or how do you see it? Because everybody, like, what I'm saying is that everybody isn't a positive influence. So
Well, that's the thing though. You don't know that certain people aren't a positive influence to you, and that's how much power these people have. You don't know that until you run into a circumstance of where it doesn't work for you or you're looked into a negative light. So, all my life, perfect example, thank by the good graces of God, I was raised by men that actually were doing the right things. So, my whole belief in my upbringing was I was born into this circle, right, of people by blood, by biologically. It just so happens, obviously, who's going to be the male and that you're going to look up to the most? Your father, if he's around, right?
yeah,
So, I have my father and my uncle, rest in peace, to look up to as male models. By the good graces of God, they do the right thing. These guys actually worked in, they had honorable jobs. They had governmental jobs. So I was lucky. But when you talk about somebody that was born into something that's not as, I'm not saying I was fully established or fully like I was born in a controlled family because I wasn't, like everything wasn't there, but it was more structured than some people that were born without a father in a home. And, those people that are born without fathers in a home, especially young boys, young males, think about it. You see all these men that may or may not be coming in and out of the homes, or you don't see any males, period. So who do you look at? You look at moms, right? You look at your older brothers and sisters, right? And what I'm saying is it's a habit, it's a cycle. Like, you don't know any better at that point. So when you grow up into a family like that, you know what I'm saying, those are the people you go off of. Even if you had a father in the home, right? It doesn't matter however your family dynamics is set up. If your family is doing wrong and you're born into that, you're not going to know anything different because that's the norm in that home. So it's really hard to really make that determination until it's too late. So, there's a lot of kids that are born in homes where they see their parents doing illegitimate things, illegal things in the household, or doing things that are unsavory, like sexual abuse, all type of abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, all type of stuff. And these kids grow up and internalizing that and thinking that's okay because that's all they know. So it gets to a point where sometimes you can't fault them, but you have to hold them accountable at the same time because they know what they're doing, but they're more so reciprocating what they've learned through their upbringing. So my thing is, yes, they should be penalized, but at the same time, it's kind of like you kind of have to have some type of empathy as far as understanding how somebody grew up in what way because they don't know any better.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I understand that because me, like, I think what you're kind of touching on is just like the role of influence in developing your identity. And for me, like growing up, I had, the people who had the most influence on me, even still to this day, is my brother, my only brother, um, and my father. And it's important, I guess, like thinking about how, my dad was always there for me. Being a single father for a good portion of, my younger life until, he got remarried. But just understanding like how, his character and how it was important for him, for my brother and I, it was important that we were good people above anything else. Like I can remember when I was in high school, I was getting 4.0s and things like that. And I didn't go to one of these schools where you can get above a 4 point. Like we just weren't doing all that where I was at in Detroit. But 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 and there was some class. I think sometimes I would get like bored. I was never rude because I was always fearful of what my dad would do to me if he found out I was being like disrespectful or rude in class. But I was like joking around or something. And I remember getting a 4.0, my dad going to the like parent teacher conference. Then my teacher told him like sometimes he's like joking in the back of class and stuff like that. And my dad didn't even really care about the fact that I had straight A's. He was more concerned about me being respectful to, the teachers and being respectful to people. So for me, like for that, and then my brother being 6 years older than me, like a lot of times when we were younger, like I was his responsibility. Like my dad would be working and like he had to take care of me. Like it wasn't an option. And if you're an older sibling, like you can tell sometimes like my brother didn't always want to like bring me with him. Like what's it look like a 10-year-old hanging out with a 16-year-old or a 12-year-old hanging out with an 18-year-old? Like that's a significant difference in age. But it's important that, he always took me along even when he didn't want to. And then, he never set a bad example. He always made sure I was like safe. I was taken care of. He always looked out for me, regardless of what was going on, and he always remained a positive influence on what I was doing, so it was like I at least always had my father and my brother as a positive influence. And it plays into, who I am today. Cause there'd be times as an adult, I would go and I would show up to some sort of like family function or something. And then my dad would say like, thanks for coming out. Like, I'm really glad you came out, and I'm looking at him like, bro, this is what I do. Like I show up when I'm supposed to, and I help out when I can. But I think that's more so like his influence on me and making sure that I was a good person before I thought about, I was a good person. I was respectful before doing anything else. And he placed that emphasis on character. And I think that is why it's important for me to help people. And that's why that's probably one of the things that I'm the most passionate about is helping people, even if it's at my own detriment, because that's what I saw him do growing up. That's what I saw my brother do growing up. And it all stems to, him being a positive influence and my brother being a positive influence on me. So those relationships, like you're saying, especially with like your father, and your mother, your mother too. But it's just important that, you understand that, like your kids are watching what you're doing. Like they're watching what you're doing. People around you are watching what you're doing. And it's important to, make sure that you're setting a good example. You're being a good role model for the people that you care about, because that plays into the development, because I know I wouldn't be who I am unless my father raised me the way he did, so it's crucial.
Most definitely, man. And I appreciate you sharing that information, man. I don't think people really take the time out to really understand how much they impact people, especially if you're, you know, well, I guess our situations are different because I'm the only child, so I didn't really have anybody else to look at. I had I learned quicker than most. So, mine was literally like fight or flight.
Yeah.
So, my thing was more so, you better get with the program now or, you're not going to get it. So, that's definitely played out to my benefit. But at the same time, it's a huge taxing and it's very detrimental because I don't have a mental capacity or mental space or anybody to really look up to or necessarily even speak to. You know what I'm saying? I'm all I got. And I know this sounds sad, but it's true. Like I'm literally all I've got when you think about it. So I was brought up with a chip on my shoulder, so to speak. A lot of things that were put on me or placed on me was with an anchor versus kids where, you're more so willy nilly. So, my level of influence and how I respect people that raised me is totally different just because, when you're the only child that, you only got one way to make it right or one chance or one shot. So, you know, you, you're getting all the energy, all the attention, you're getting all the whoopings. So it's a gift and a curse. It's more so a curse than anything, especially the older you get. But I was very fortunate to have certain people that were in the right places in their lives. I'm not saying they did the best things, but they were in the right place of their lives for me to develop to the young man I am today. There's a lot of people out there that are the only kid or they don't have anybody like a buddy system where they have a brother or sister that actually, you know, thought it took responsibility as far as taking care of people. Like Marcus had a bigger brother. There's a lot of people where brothers and sisters hate each other from day one.
Oh man, that's crazy. The reason I think that's crazy is that, like, I know everybody grows up different. Everybody's like the dynamics are different. So, like, when I think about the relationship that I have with my brother, like it's different because for me, like, I appreciate my brother because when I have problems, like, that's the first person that I'll call him. I hate to burden him with what's going on with me, but it's like there's really no time for disagreement or anything like that, because the way that we grew up, I think it was important that and my, dad made sure that we think we looked out for each other and we appreciate each other. So when I see someone who has a sibling and they don't get along, like sometimes, I don't even understand it, because that's one of the strongest relationships I have, is the relationship with my brother, and I couldn't, I hope that people with siblings don't take their sibling for granted, because that's a strong relationship, and it's important. But I think that also plays into, like you saying, Joe, how your parents kind of raise you. It really kind of falls back on that too.
Well, yeah, and what makes it interesting about that situation is both of my parents had siblings. So that's a whole different dynamic in itself. So the way I see things and how I came into the fold, everybody, even my cousins, my first cousins, they had siblings. So, I always grew up like, man, I would kill to have a sibling. So, a lot of people don't understand the value in that. Even if I had a shitty sibling, I still would take that over not having one, period.
Yeah, and that's just having a perspective there. Because, like I said, you just like, man, we just take things for granted. We take people for granted, and like it's like people wishing they had the problems that other people have. Um, so it's just something important to notate as move on to something else. Just like kind of thinking about, like, you never know, as far as influence, you never know who else is, like I just was saying, like who's watching you, like who's paying attention to what you're doing. You just never, sometimes you don't know how other people perceive you, even people you've never spoken to, so you don't know what type of impression you're making on people. For example, there was a guy, because I was in school for a long time, but I was always working for the most part. I always for 5 years while I was in college, I had two jobs and I was a full-time student. So for 5 of those years, I would go to work, go to class, go to class, go to work. My days were in class and 12 hours at work, bouncing between two jobs. So I remember one time I had went and I had a cell phone. I had to go in the store to pay my phone, and the guy that I worked with on my phone, like I would go in every month, pay my bill. I don't know why I had to go in there to pay my bill, but it was on the way to work, like in walking distance of my other job. So I go in there, we chop it up. And then one day I went in there and he told me, I forget, I was probably like 22. I probably easily, I think 22 at the time. But he was like, he's like, you come in here. He's like, I just wanted you to know that, like, you encouraged me to go back to school. Like, he told me, he's like, I've enrolled in some college courses, and he's like, I see you working, and I see all the work that you're putting in. And he's like, I just wanted you to know that you kind of inspired me to do that. And that meant a lot to me, because for me, like, that's just what I do. I work all day and I go to sleep. Like, that's kind of my normal grind, but I didn't understand how he perceived it. And I never bragged about having two jobs. I actually thought it was a burden, because I wanted to not work all the time, but that was a necessity for me. And I think he saw that. And I think it's important. And that's what I was saying. It's important is because you never know how your actions affect somebody else, even if they never tell you. And that's why it's important to, carry yourself, the best way you can, because people will watch what you do, and you can have a positive impact on somebody, and you never even know it. So
You know what? I'm glad you shared this story. I've had a couple similar success stories to that as well, man. Like, people have seen what I've done, and I think I started a wave actually when I graduated with my graduate, where it was just a whole flood of people going into the same program that I went to. It was like, well, shoot, if he can do it, I know I can do it. and they may not have never said anything about it, but while I was going through it, I could tell that they were thinking about it because they were asking me questions like, so is it really that hard? Is it really that difficult? And I would always tell them like, man, it's what you make it. This stuff is super easy. This is easier than undergrad, knowing damn well I might be lying about I'm mainly lying for the most part, but it's just the whole idea of where I would be the type of person where, yeah, it was really hard for me, but I'm not going to tell you how hard it was for me because it's not going to do you any justice. I'm not arrogant in that way. If anything, I'm going to boost you up and guide you. The whole idea is to make you better than me. And that's how I'm a firm believer that in life, people don't come to you and ask you for advice or questions for no reason. That's your opportune choice to do some good in this world by actually paying it forward. So, if something's 100% hard or something like that, I make sure that I tell people like, man, it's not as hard as you think it is, even though damn well it is hard. But you want to build people's psyche up, man, to the point where they can go and shoot for the moon, man, maybe even further than that. So, that's just the type of individual I am.
Yeah, that's major. That's huge, man. It just shows your, capacity to want to help people out, and that you're planting, like, I think that's planting seeds of hope, seeds of success, and not planting that seed of like doubt, like, yeah, it was hard. Cause you can tell somebody something's going to be hard and that'll discourage them altogether, so, I mean, you guys.
And then, that's never the goal, man. You want to see everybody succeed. I even tell people that I dislike strongly. How many people can say that they dislike someone strongly and someone comes up to you and asks you about advice and information and I gas you up?
And brother, that's a definition of taking the high road, Joe. That's what that is.
People have no idea, man.
But no, that's is important. Like really taking a look at the people that you interact with and seeing if they have, what kind of impact do they have on you? Is it a negative one? Is it a positive one? Do you get around this person and you want to, start working towards your goals? If that's working out, working on your business, doing something, starting a new hobby or traveling or, anything, or does this person, that you're around make you just want to stay in your ways and go drink and go do things that'll, kind of lead to nothingness? Just ask yourself, what type of impact is this person, or what kind of influence does this person have on me, and kind of go from there. And the second one kind of ties into just, know who the folks are that, you're around. Like you can be intentional. You can be very intentional about the people that you associate with, and that's key when you're trying to do something. If you're trying to turn your life around, like be intentional about who you interact with. It's okay to leave some people behind sometimes if you have to.
Definitely.
It's okay to lose that contact. It's all right. They'll get over it. There's other people they can talk to. That might at times be the best thing that you can do. I mean, sometimes, like I said, we talked about that before. Like sometimes you just got to leave folks behind. But just be deliberate about who you interact with and find people that you feel like are going to help you move in the right direction. And if that's something you need help with, if you're in a spot where you're struggling, you're like, well, I'm in this bad situation and I'm trying to figure out like who I can reach out to, and you kind of don't know where to start. Like I would start like reaching out to somebody. Like you can easily email us and ask us a question. If you're struggling with something like that, like we might be able to hit you with something that, you weren't thinking about before, so like use us as a resource. I mean, we'll continue to be a resource. So don't think that because we're doing this, that, I mean, we want to be able to engage with people and help people out. So like we are a resource for you all that are listening. But those are my tips, Joe.
I think that you've covered more than enough, man. I honestly believe that, influence is going a long way, but it's very important to not necessarily be intentional, but you got to be mindful. If you really care about people and, people are looking up to you, don't blow them off. And if you do blow them off, make a reasonable explanation for that. So actually take out the time to tell them why they can't do this or make the time to do that, because realistically, you don't understand how much of a factor you play into somebody's upbringing. And I don't think people realize how important that is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a kid either. There's full-fledged adults looking at kids that are 15, 16, like, damn, like that kid's doing it. Like, how does he do it? Like, you just don't understand that your drive alone can definitely inspire anybody. So be mindful of that, man. Keep your head on the swivel. So sometimes you may not realize it till after the fact. I understand that. That's cool, but at least be able to mitigate or actually try to control what you actually have that's just sitting right in front of your face. I think that it will go a long way, and before you know it, that person might one day pull you up the ranks. So that's how I see it.
All right. Well, I think that's all we have. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to the Unscripted Dreams episode. We're happy to bring it to you all, man. We hope you all enjoy it, and really looking forward to the feedback that we're getting, and look forward to doing more shows and providing more quality content. So again, man, thanks for listening, and take care.
All right. Peace.